The streets of Ouagadougou didn't just wake up to another sunrise that morning. They woke up to the rumble of a storm. Not the kind that pours rain from the sky, but the kind that shakes the ground beneath your feet. A storm of truth. Before the markets opened, before the morning calls to prayer had faded, whispers began to spread. Whispers about a leak. Not a rumor, not gossip, but hard, undeniable documents that had slipped out from the shadows. And inside those pages lay a truth so sharp, it could cut through years of carefully woven lies. They carried the names of certain French-funded NGOs, organizations that wore the face of charity, spoke the language of development, and promised to help lift communities out of poverty. But between the lines, behind the polished press releases and smiling photographs, there was another story. A story of control, where aid became a leash. A story of influence, where friendship was used as a tool. A story of betrayal, where the hand that claimed to feed you was the same one holding you down. And as the sun rose higher over the city, people began to understand this wasn't just about NGOs. This was about power, about who really calls the shots in Africa, and whether Burkina Faso was ready to let that go unanswered. At first glance, the leak seemed harmless. Just another stack of reports, budgets, and meeting notes. The kind of paperwork you'd expect from any organization claiming to work in development. But when the investigators looked closer, the cracks began to show. The budget sheets didn't just list school supplies or medical kits. They had strange, unexplained lines. Millions allocated to special field operations and strategic outreach. Terms no one could explain. Buried in the email archives were encrypted messages, impossible to read without special clearance. Why would a charity need military-grade encryption? Then came the most chilling find, hand-drawn maps. Not of villages to be helped, but of the land's veins. Gold mines, fertile farmlands, water sources. They weren't planning humanitarian projects, they were mapping wealth. Our wealth. The documents told a story in plain ink, one that linked these so-called NGOs to networks of surveillance. They were quietly tracking political movements, influencing local media narratives, and keeping meticulous logs of every leader who spoke too loudly against foreign interference. This wasn't charity work. This was reconnaissance. This wasn't aid. It was a blueprint, carefully designed to control, to own, and to decide the future of Burkina Faso without ever asking its people. By mid-morning, word of the leak had already reached every corner of Ouagadougou. Inside the presidential palace, the air was tense, not with confusion, but with the sharp clarity of betrayal. President Ibrahim Traoré wasted no time. He summoned his cabinet, senior military officers, and the heads of national intelligence for an emergency session. The room was heavy with silence, broken only by the rustle of papers and the low murmur of whispered briefings. Ministers flipped through the leaked documents, their eyes narrowing at every incriminating page. Intelligence chiefs laid out timelines, connections, and the undeniable evidence that these so-called humanitarian organizations were, in fact, operating as agents of influence. Maps of gold-rich regions, budgets funneled into covert outreach, encrypted communications to foreign capitals. The proof was sitting right there on the table. Traoré listened, stone-faced, and when the final briefing ended, he didn't deliberate for hours or call for more investigation. Like so many leaders before him, he simply rose from his chair, walked to the press room, and faced the cameras. His words were deliberate, sharp, and without hesitation. The sovereignty of Burkina Faso is not for sale. Those who work against it have no place here. No diplomatic sugarcoating, no room for negotiation. The message was clear. Anyone, no matter their flag, no matter their disguise, who undermines the independence of Burkina Faso would be shown the door. And not tomorrow, today. The response was as fast as the decision itself. There would be no drawn-out negotiations, no polite exit strategies. Within hours, official letters were delivered to the targeted NGOs. Their licenses were revoked, their offices ordered shut, their vehicles and equipment catalogued for inspection. Every foreign staff member was given 48 hours to leave the country. The streets of Ouagadougou buzzed with the news. Crowds gathered outside the closed offices, some in disbelief, others breaking into spontaneous applause. Radio hosts called it a sovereignty strike. In Paris, government spokespeople carefully chose their words. They expressed concern, urged dialogue, and warned of misunderstandings, but stopped short of issuing threats. They knew that any heavy-handed move could turn one nation's decision into a continental domino effect, and that's exactly what began to happen. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, African commentators and political activists praised Traoré's boldness. Hashtags like Africa, for Africans and hands off our land, trended across the continent. Youth groups organized rallies, waving both the Burkinabe flag and banners reading, "Sovereignty is our right, not a gift." It wasn't just support, it was momentum. Political analysts started calling this moment the first spark of a broader African pushback against the quiet, decades-old network of foreign influence disguised as aid. For many, it was the first time in years they'd seen an African leader not just talk about independence, but enforce it. And all of it had started with a few pages of leaked documents and the will to act on them. What happened in Ouagadougou is already being studied in capitals across Africa and beyond. Analysts say this single decision has done more than shut down a few questionable offices. It has sent an unmistakable signal to every government, every corporation, and every so-called aid organization that Africa is no longer willing to trade dignity for donations. For decades, foreign-funded programs came with hidden price tags, influence over policies, quiet control over resources, and a steady shaping of public opinion. Today, Burkina Faso has pulled that curtain back. It has shown the continent that aid, without respect, is nothing more than exploitation with a smile. The message to the NGOs caught in this scandal could not be sharper. Burkina Faso's doors are now closed to those who undermine its sovereignty. And the lock is one they cannot pick, bribe, or break. But beyond Burkina Faso's borders lies the question that's making the world uneasy. Who will be next? Which leader will follow this example? Which nation will say enough and take back control of its own destiny? For the people of Burkina Faso, this is not just a political win. It's a moment of pride, proof that a country can draw the line and hold it even under pressure. And for the rest of Africa, it's a reminder, the era of waiting for permission is over.